The Shadow of the Abyss. Part 1, The Mysterious Vessel. The horizon stretched wide, an endless expanse of ocean under a pale, cloud-choked sky. The wind whipped through the hair of the crew as the Argonaut, a weathered cargo ship, cut its way through the waves. Captain Noah Graves stood at the helm, his eyes fixed on the distant horizon, where something had caught his attention, a dark shape, half hidden by the thickening fog. "Captain," called out First Mate William Pierce, his voice uneasy. "Something's wrong with the ship." Noah glanced at the crew, who were working their duties in a distracted, almost detached manner. The air felt wrong, heavy, like a storm was pressing in, but there were no signs of a squall. It was as though something invisible weighed the ship down. "Bring it about," Noah ordered, his voice low. "What do you see, Pierce?" Pierce swallowed hard, stepping forward to point toward the distant fog. "There, something is out there. A ship, maybe. It's just drifting. But it doesn't look like anything I've ever seen before." The crew fell silent, their gaze turning toward the fog. Even the seagulls had stopped calling, their eerie silence adding to the sense of foreboding that hung in the air. Noah stepped closer to the edge of the deck, narrowing his eyes. In the distance, the shape of the ship was growing clearer, a hulking, ancient vessel, its sails tattered and torn. Its hull was dark, almost black, and it seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy. It looked abandoned, but there was something alive about it. "Is it moving?" asked Eliza Turner, the ship's medic, her voice tight with fear. "Why does it look so wrong?" Pierce nodded slowly, his eyes wide. "I think it's drifting toward us, Captain." Noah cursed under his breath. This was a mistake, he knew it instinctively. They should turn away, leave the area. But something deep inside, compelled him to approach. "Prepare to board," Noah ordered, his voice cutting through the tension. "We'll investigate." Part 2, The Silent Crew. The Argonaut drifted closer to the unknown vessel, the fog thickening as they approached. The crew stood silent, as though all the life had been drained from them. The wind had died down completely, leaving the ship eerily still. The only sound was the creaking of the wood beneath their feet, the soft lapping of water against the hull. The other ship, as it had come to be known, loomed ahead. Its sails were shredded, hanging like tattered rags, and the wood of its deck appeared old and rotted. Yet, there was an undeniable presence about it, like an ancient beast, waiting to strike. Noah led the way, stepping onto the rickety gangplank and making his way toward the mysterious ship. His heart hammered in his chest, but his legs moved with purpose, as if some dark force had taken hold of him. His crew followed, though there was a hesitation in their steps, a reluctance to venture onto this cursed vessel. The air grew colder as they boarded the other ship. It was unnaturally cold, a biting chill that seemed to seep into their very bones. "Where is everyone?" Eliza asked, her voice shaking. "There's no sign of life." The deck was eerily empty, save for the faint remnants of footprints in the dust that had gathered. But there were no crew members, no signs of struggle, only the silence of an empty ship drifting through the fog. Noah scanned the deck, his eyes narrowing. "It's like they've just disappeared," he muttered. "I don't like this," Pierce said, his voice taut. "We should turn around." But Noah's gaze was drawn forward, toward the captain's quarters. There, in the center of the deck, was an open hatch, leading below deck into the belly of the ship. "I'm going down," Noah decided. "I need answers." Without waiting for protest, he made his way toward the hatch, the creaking wood beneath his boots the only sound breaking the oppressive silence. His crew hesitated for a moment before following, one by one, their faces etched with fear and curiosity. The air inside the ship was thick, damp with decay. The smell of mildew and rot hung heavy, choking their senses. As Noah led the way, his lantern cast dancing shadows on the walls, revealing old furniture, empty rooms, and damp corridors. But there was something else, something wrong. "Look at the walls," Eliza whispered, her voice trembling. Carved into the wooden panels were strange symbols, twisted, unnatural shapes, some of which seemed to move when viewed from different angles. The air seemed to hum with an unseen energy, an eerie vibration that prickled their skin. Suddenly, the ship groaned, a deep, guttural sound that rattled their bones. A chill ran through Noah's spine. "Something's not right," he muttered. And then they heard it. A faint, low whisper, just at the edge of hearing. It wasn't human, it was too distorted, too alien. "Leave this place," the voice crooned, its words barely audible but filled with a terrible, ancient malice. Noah's hand tightened around his lantern, his pulse racing. "We need to go back," Pierce said, his voice cracked with fear. But before anyone could move, the air grew even colder, and the whisper became louder. "You're not leaving." Part 3, The Curse of the Abyss. The whispers intensified, filling the air with an oppressive, suffocating force. The ship groaned again, as though alive, its wooden timbers creaking in protest against the unholy energy that now radiated through the walls. Noah's heart pounded in his chest, and every instinct screamed at him to leave, to abandon this forsaken vessel and return to the Argonaut. But something deep inside, compelled him to stay. "No, we're not leaving until we get to the bottom of this," he said, his voice low and resolute. He turned to Eliza, Pierce, and the rest of the crew. "Keep moving. We need to find the source of this." Reluctantly, the crew pressed on, their eyes darting nervously as they moved through the ship's dark, decaying corridors. The symbols on the walls seemed to grow more intricate, more twisted the deeper they went. Each step felt like a descent into madness. The whispering grew louder, reverberating off the walls like 1,000 voices pressing in from all sides. "We are the cursed," the voice hissed, "we are the forsaken." Suddenly, a door slammed open at the end of the corridor, revealing a large, dimly lit room. It was a chapel of sorts, though no religious symbols adorned the walls, only dark runes and strange sigils. At the center of the room stood a massive stone altar, covered in what appeared to be dried blood. And on the altar, bound in chains, lay a body. A woman. Her skin was pale, stretched taut over her bones, her eyes wide open and staring at nothing. She was dead, but her presence was undeniable. Her soul lingered in this place. Eliza gasped, rushing forward to examine the body. Who is this?" Noah stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. I think she's the reason this ship is cursed." As if on cue, the room trembled, and a low, guttural growl echoed from the shadows. "No, no!" Pierce shouted, backing away. "We need to leave. Now." But it was too late. From the shadows emerged a figure, cloaked in tattered robes, its face obscured by a dark hood. It was tall, unnaturally tall, and as it stepped forward, its presence seemed to drain the very light from the room. "You are too late," the figure intoned in a voice that was both female and male, ancient and new, "the curse has already begun." The woman on the altar stirred, her mouth slowly curling into a grin that was more a rictus than a smile. Her eyes were empty, voids of blackness that seemed to suck in the very light around them. And then, with a voice like the tearing of the ocean itself, she whispered, "You belong to the abyss now." Part 4, The Ship of the Damned. Clara gasped as the ship lurched violently, its timbers creaking under a weight that shouldn't have been there. The very air seemed to crackle with power, and the shadows within the chapel room deepened, stretching unnaturally toward the crew. The robed figure stepped forward, its tall form impossibly elongated, its movements eerily graceful. Its hands, long and bony, reached toward Noah, Pierce, and the others, the air around them growing thick and cold, as though the very temperature of the room had dropped to freezing levels. "We can't stay here," Pierce shouted, panic rising in his voice. "It's too powerful." But the figure only smiled, its face remaining hidden beneath the hood. "Too late. You've already made your choice. There is no escape from the abyss." Before Noah could respond, the woman on the altar began to move, slowly, grotesquely, as though the chains binding her were no longer enough to contain her. Her eyes rolled back into her head, and she let out an inhuman shriek that shook the very foundation of the ship. The ship groaned again, its timbers bending under the pressure. She was the first, the robed figure intoned, its voice a chilling blend of male and female. But you will all follow. And that's when the ship began to move, not through the water, but through the air, its enormous sails snapping to life despite the stillness that had gripped the sea. The world around them twisted, the very sky above them shifting, folding inward like a wound that would never heal. The abyss had claimed them. Part 5, The Deepest Darkness. The world around the crew collapsed into chaos. The ship, the other ship, the cursed vessel, was no longer floating on the ocean. It was suspended in the air, hanging over a vast, yawning chasm that seemed to stretch into infinity. Dark, swirling clouds surrounded them, the air thick with an oppressive energy that pressed down on their chests like the weight of the sea itself. Noah stumbled, his eyes wide with disbelief as he gazed into the abyss below. The dark chasm seemed to breathe, its edges undulating with a pulse, alive, hungry, and reaching. "No one escapes," the robed figure whispered, its voice coming from every direction. "The abyss takes all. And it will take you." "No," Noah gasped, his voice hoarse. "We can still fight. We can." The figure's hand shot out, grabbing Noah by the throat and lifting him off the ground. Pierce screamed, but his voice was swallowed by the thickening fog. The air grew colder, until it felt like the very life was being drained from their bodies. "You cannot escape," the figure intoned again, as the woman on the altar slowly rose, her chains rattling like the sounds of the dead. "You belong to the abyss now." Part 6, The End of All Things. As the robed figure's grip tightened around Noah's neck, he fought to draw breath, his vision growing blurry. It was as if the very fabric of his being was being consumed, his soul being pulled down into that unholy chasm. But just as his strength began to wane, something inside him snapped, something primal, something that burned with the fury of the ocean itself. "No," he roared, summoning every last ounce of his strength. With a force born of sheer will, he broke free from the figure's grasp, stumbling backward into the shadows. His crew watched, wide-eyed, as the abyss itself seemed to scream in fury. "You cannot fight me," the figure growled, but Noah had no intention of giving in. "Watch me," he spat. The woman on the altar lunged forward, her mouth open in a horrific scream. Her chains snapped apart like brittle twigs, and as her form began to collapse into shadow, Noah knew the final battle was here. And with that, the abyss opened its maw, ready to swallow them all. Part 7, The Final Descent. The ship hung suspended over the abyss, its dark sails billowing in a wind that wasn't there. The sky above them was a swirling black void, the clouds twisting like a roiling sea. Noah's breath came in ragged gasps, his body aching from the figure's cruel grip. The shadows around them seemed to grow deeper, the air thick with an unnatural cold. The woman, now fully risen from the altar, seemed to swell with an otherworldly power. Her skin was no longer pale but mottled with veins of shadow, her mouth stretched wide in a grotesque grin. Her chains rattled as she moved toward Noah, her eyes gleaming with malevolence. "You can't win, Captain," she hissed, her voice like the whisper of 1,000 lost souls. "The abyss claims all. You are nothing." "No," Noah spat, his voice filled with defiance. "We still have a chance." The abyss rumbled beneath them, a deep, guttural sound that vibrated through the ship's very timbers. The robed figure, who had been standing motionless, suddenly stepped forward, its hands raised as if to summon the darkness itself. "You have no power here," it said in a voice like the crushing of stone. "The abyss is eternal. It consumes all, flesh, spirit, memory. All things fall into it." The crew stood frozen, their faces pale, their hearts gripped by fear. Eliza's hand trembled as she gripped her lantern, its light flickering weakly against the encroaching darkness. "Don't listen to it," Noah urged, turning toward his crew. "We can fight this. We just have to take back the ship." His words were a lifeline, a thread of hope in the vast, oppressive void. But hope was a fragile thing here, in the heart of the abyss. Noah turned back toward the altar, where the woman had now fully risen. Her form was a thing of nightmare, writhing with shadows that seemed to move on their own, as if alive. She reached out a hand, and with it, the darkness seemed to grow, spreading over the deck of the ship, consuming the light, the very air. With every step she took, the ship groaned and shuddered, as if it, too, was being swallowed whole. The abyss was consuming it. Noah stepped forward, the cold biting into his skin, but something inside him flared with purpose. He couldn't let it end like this. He wouldn't. He gripped the hilt of his knife, the only weapon he had left, and rushed forward, his heart pounding in his chest. The woman's laughter filled the air, an eerie, mocking sound. "You're too late, Captain," she crooned. "We are the abyss." But Noah didn't hesitate. As the woman lunged toward him, he struck, driving his blade into the heart of the dark, shifting shadow that had once been her. The ship screamed, the sound of its timbers splitting apart echoing through the void. The woman's form collapsed with a final, shrill scream, her body disintegrating into the air like ash before a flame. The robed figure howled in rage, its cloak whipping violently around it. "No. You can't undo what has been done." But Noah, with Eliza's voice calling out behind him, pushed through the darkness. "We'll undo it together." With one final, desperate cry, the crew united in a single, combined effort, their voices blending with the forces of the ship, calling on whatever strength they had left. The abyss, in its fury, pushed back. The sea below them roared like an angry beast, but the ship began to break free from the grip of darkness. The moment the woman's shadowy form dissolved, the cursed ship reversed. The world trembled as the ship lurched violently, like a beast casting off a monstrous burden. The robed figure screamed, its form evaporating into a cloud of darkness, pulled into the chasm. The ship's timbers groaned as the weight of the curse was lifted, the hull no longer creaking under the pressure of some malevolent force. The abyss seemed to retreat, its influence lessened. The ship itself, though battered, now seemed to float in normal waters, as if they had been cast free from the dark magic that had bound them. But the crew was changed. The weight of what they had experienced would never leave them. They were no longer just sailors. They had faced the void, and they had survived. Noah stood at the helm, gazing out into the vast expanse of ocean, the fog finally beginning to lift, revealing a bright, blue sky. The Argonaut, their ship, was still intact, though battered and scarred from the horrors it had endured. "We made it," Eliza whispered, her voice hoarse but filled with a quiet relief. "We did," Noah murmured, his eyes scanning the horizon. "But we've seen what lies beneath. And it's not finished with us. Not yet." The crew stood silently, the only sound the gentle lapping of waves against the hull. The ocean stretched before them, endless, eternal, and filled with secrets. They had escaped the abyss, but Noah knew one thing for certain: the darkness never truly lets go.